Hey everybody, I'm Corey from Aquarium Co-Op. Today we've got Dean, master breeder Dean. He's been to Peru with me. You've seen his fish room a bunch. And today I want to talk about fish foods because I think you're an unbiased, like anyone else I have, like let's say last week's guest, the Shrimp King. Obviously he's got the Shrimp King foods. He's biased towards them. I'm biased towards my own food. You don't own a food and you feed a wide variety.
A lot of variety. Yeah.
That's why I feel like you're a good guest to have. And just so happens he's going to work out perfect for my analogies today because you're a cook.
Perfect. Great.
It helps me a bunch. So the first thing I want to focus on is I think everyone on the internet is wrong. So I'm going to start there.
Okay.
Online, I feel that everyone evaluates a food based on the ingredients.
Pretty much true. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So whether it's whole herring, whole salmon, this is bad, this is good, that type of thing. Now, why I think it's crazy is, what is with the F everywhere? I don't even know what that is. What I find crazy
that might be
is
bad.
that's not the way we look at food for humans. Like, we can look at ingredients, but I'm convinced if you give me, let's say, salmon, some potatoes, some other vegetables, and some ingredients, and you give Dean the same ingredients, being that you've been to lots of culinary schools, you're a teacher of culinary arts and that type of thing. Even though we have the same ingredients, the end product would be very, very different.
Right. It's how we treated those ingredients to get to the end product.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I think a lot of our fish foods pretty much have the same ingredients, but they are processed differently.
Yep. And yeah, I've got something I can bring up about that.
And I was going to go back. One other thing is people also look at the protein level of the food, not just the ingredients, but what's the crude protein? Well, isn't that arbitrary depending on who's testing it?
So yes, there's a lot we could talk about in the way fish foods are tested and the way they're looked at. And you're segueing straight into what I want to talk about. And that is, I first learned this probably 10 years ago, which was bloodworms. So I had a question, and unfortunately I have to say Hikari couldn't answer this for me.
Oh, great.
So, because it was their product. And I asked the rep, I go, why is it that the crude protein on the frozen bloodworm, so crude protein, is 6%.
Right.
If you look at their freeze-dried, it's 55%.
Did you find an answer? Because
I do know the answer now.
I can guess at the answer.
But I thought for sure the rep in the store would be like, oh, here's the answer. And what do you think the answer is? Because you're probably right.
So the frozen ones are probably 80, 90% water.
Yep.
The freeze-dried ones, we've taken all the water out and left all of the protein maybe behind.
Right.
Right?
And it goes by weight.
And so, but if your fish eat the same weight of frozen as freeze-dried, they're going to be so fat with bloat. I mean, they could never eat that much of the freeze-dried.
Well, and my thing is so if frozen bloodworms are a worm with water, and freeze-dried is a worm without water, the minute we put it into water, it starts absorbing water. Right. So the reality is, even though the packaging, because I've had customers in the past, they go, well, freeze-dried are so much better. And it's like, if we break it down and we think about it, like a live bloodworm, a frozen bloodworm, and a freeze-dried bloodworm, really that's all the exact same thing. It's just how we've processed that same thing. It's not a different thing. Right. We didn't remove protein content from it. It literally just is the way things are weighed and measured out on food grade packaging. Right. And that's a big thing to know, is that the way we look at foods is it's based on, unfortunately, it doesn't have to say dry weight, wet weight.
Doesn't have to say that for fish food.
And when you're making a fish food, you can also play those numbers with, so let's say we were going to make a fish food, I think one of these Sarah foods. I think the treat mix has bloodworms in it. And the protein right now on this thing is 44.7%. I think legally we can put we can take the stat as a freeze-dried or as a wet weight. Like, I think you can put it together.
The company can do that.
Right. So if you're making a fish food, if I put in frozen bloodworms or wet bloodworms, the protein percentage is going to be much lower in their overall mix.
Right.
If I put a freeze-dried version in,
right.
then we're getting, a much heavier protein mix. And I feel like that's a really, like, depending on what you want to do, like if you're making a spirulina food, you want that protein to be really low because people think, oh yeah, spirulina eating fish don't want the protein.
Right.
And if you're trying to make a carnivore food, you're going to skew it the other way, even though it's literally the same thing when the fish is eating it.
Right.
So
exactly.
That's where I kind of feel like there's a big, and part of it is too, like I know from talking with Sarah, they have like, right here it says 3.6% is krill. That's the dry weight though, because they could inflate that to be like 30% is krill.
Yeah, because you got to remember, most of this stuff starts out as a wet product, a wet mixture.
Yeah.
And then it's either, dried into flakes, pressed into pellets, whatever, tablets, crumbles.
Yeah.
So, So is that done when it's wet or after when it's dry?
And I guess the problem is, as a hobbyist, we have no way to know.
No,
we can ask a company and they could say, yes, we are, or we aren't, or...
And they might not even know. I mean, because a lot of them, they might be just repackaging something
that happens a lot.
Made for the aquaculture industry.
Yep.
Not for fish hobbyists.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff's being made in, like China, gets flown over. And that happens way more than people think. People go like, oh, well, I don't want to buy Chinese products. Like most things are being made, and then in fine print somewhere very small, you'll see, oh, it's been packaged in the USA, made in China.
Right.
Exactly. And that's how companies kind of get around that. They'll put a giant like but like bottled in the USA, and then a very tiny made in a different country type of thing. Right. So, but the one thing I do want to bring up, I was trying to figure out how do I illustrate to people how good food is right now. Like, I feel that our foods are amazing. Like, you've been around in the hobby for quite a long time. How many years, roughly?
At least 50, probably more than like 53.
Okay.
Something like that.
I was going to say that, like, we've been making foods for 50 years.
Yes.
And obviously, through 50 years of competition between brands, they've strived to get better and better and better and better.
See, I mean, let's just take flake foods for example.
Sure.
Just for flake foods. Okay, so 53 years ago, flake foods were non-existent. And then all of a sudden they hit the market and it was like the thing to do. Mm-hmm. Feed your fish flake food. Have the flakes got better over the years, or have they got better at telling us what's in them, or at least putting that into English language? Okay,
yeah, I don't know.
Because the process has not changed. It's making a meal, turning it into a flake, drying it. Now, there is advances in freeze drying that, so it's not as hot when they process it. So I think what we're talking about is how do we treat those ingredients to bring them from a raw ingredient to a fish food.
I would agree that there's probably advances there. I do believe in 50 years, we understand what an ornamental fish needs a little bit better. I'm not going to say it's like, oh man, we didn't know anything and now we know it all.
No, but we certainly know what brings out color.
Right.
Helps put on size, girth.
And me not being around long enough, I can't tell you that 50 years ago, we knew that krill would bring out pinks and reds, or we didn't. And we would, I don't know if we knew what part of it, why it would do it.
Right. I don't even think krill was in a fish food 50 years ago.
Right. So I do believe fish foods in general have gotten better. Like, for instance, one of the old fish foods I ate was like salmon eggs. Like, it was just...
Why?
Because it was, a YouTube thing. But, so I think we took stuff where it's like, well, fish eat salmon eggs, so that's probably a pretty good thing. And the reality is, maybe it is a pretty good thing. But, keep going down the rabbit hole. I think we've gotten better. And I think we're at a point now, and maybe we've been here for 50 years, but, like, of all the brands of food, there's a lot of fighting on which is best and that type of thing. I look at it like, let's say it's a baseball team or a basketball team or something like that, where any given year, really any of those teams could win the championship.
Correct.
There's going to be some that you're like, well, these guys are more poised to do it because they've done it more often. But then there's always the, oh, they've lost 20 years in a row and now they took the Super Bowl or something like that.
Right.
So what I want to explain to people, though, is even the worst players in those leagues are still so much better than the average person. So if me, you, Jimmy, Joel, and someone else get a 5-person team, we're going to play basketball versus the 5 worst people in the NBA, it's not even a contest.
They would still kick our butts, basically.
And that's where I kind of feel like we are in fish foods today, is like we've got all these big brands,
right? And
any given product or year, a product is great, and the flavor of the year, and like, yeah, we're all Seahawks fans, and now we're all this fan. The reality is, just because it's not the flavor doesn't mean they really got much worse. They're still in contention. They could still come back. And I think we need to think about it when people go, I only feed this food. Think of them as, yes, you love the Raiders. I get it. You love this brand, and it's not that your brand is bad and mine's better. It's just different. And I think a lot of us, like in the fish keeping world, a lot of times people are like, I only feed my fish the best, right? And they'll say that statement, but then you'll find out they've fed New Life Spectrum for the last 10 years. And it's like, well, how do you know it's the best? So if you're not trying other new foods that came out.
Right. So let me paraphrase. So basically, if we say there is a worst food out there today.
Yeah, Wardley's.
It's still better than anything we had 50 years ago.
I think that's a true statement.
I would agree with that.
I think it's true. I mean, you might be able to be like, well, it's not that much better. I just think in general, technologies and understanding of fish is just straight up better.
Yeah, right.
You know, I think that lends a guy like you to be able to breed easier.
Yep.
Just because we
raise the fish faster, better.
Yeah.
Stronger.
And so what I wonder is, like, if we know in most other hobbies, like sports in general, we're brand loyal. Like, you'll watch people that love the Lions or something, and they'll lose every single time, and they'll still be their favorite team. I think we have that going on in fish foods as well. Like, oh, I've always fed Hikari, and I always will, and my father did, and I bred this fish, and that's why I do it. That doesn't mean it's the best. It also doesn't mean it's terrible. But I think the brand loyalty blinds people a lot.
I agree. I mean, I just, using my fish room as an analogy, I am a fish food junkie.
Mm-hmm. I think most people are. I was thinking about that today.
Because I'm always looking for something that might be a little bit better, or might work better, or might not foul the tank as quick. Mm-hmm. Because when you're raising a lot of fry in a 10-gallon tank, and you want to feed them a lot, and you don't want that food to end up in the filter. You want it to end up in their stomach.
Right.
Right? So I'm constantly trying new foods. I mean, and I know that I've told you about some of my trials and errors that haven't worked, and you're not carrying that food, thank God, because I wouldn't buy it from you. But that's kind of,
you're free to say if you don't like a food or you do like a food. It's your own opinion. So
brand loyalty. I mean, there are a few foods that I have found that I really like, that I will probably keep buying until I find something better.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 years ago, flake food was not in my fish room, and now there's one that is.
Yeah.
Well,
I think I was over at your house last week, and I saw you trying a new fish food, one that I sell, which is Vibra Bites.
Vibra Bites, yeah.
And I think this is a good example of basically everything in your fish room would eat it, including wild-caught discus would eat it.
Right.
But German blue rams, electric blue rams, gold rams, all the rams would not touch it at all. They wouldn't
touch it. They would just mouth it, and it's all over the bottom.
Right. And so, like, when you have a fish room like that and one species doesn't like it, is that food bad? Is it good? Like, it's in a weird situation where it's because I think on one hand I'd be like, wild caught discus are eating it. That's amazing.
Right.
But then at the other hand, you're like, but rams won't touch it. That seems really bizarre considering they eat a lot of stuff.
Exactly. And rams and discus in the wild are in the same sort of water condition.
And they're both kind of treated as like finicky, if
finicky
you will.
eaters, right.
You know, so I thought that was really bizarre. And yet, if you only had a couple of tanks with rams, you'd be like, Fiberbrights are terrible.
Exactly.
They're horrible food.
You would never buy them again.
Right.
Right. But if you had a whole fish room and you're going, man, the rainbows ate it all before it hit the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, the 800 gallon loves it. I don't think I've had a tank here that didn't eat it or anything.
That particular food, I love the shape of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's conducive for fish to attack it.
Right.
Right.
Well, I saw we were feeding like little rasboras and stuff, and it goes in their mouth the same way bloodworms does.
Right.
And it is a food that is meant to be bloodworms. So
right.
it's like
Exactly.
I'm not shocked that, oh man, look, it's doing what bloodworms do.
Right.
You know.
But you know, if you want to, I mean, the wild discus, that's a really good example actually, because until last summer, I had never gone and caught wild discus myself.
Mm-hmm.
I had probably purchased wild discus, but they had already been in someone else's hands.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And been feeding. So, you know, from years ago, the thing was, okay, you brought these wild discus in, you can only feed them live worms or live this or live that. So when I brought the wild discus back, they were probably the quickest fish to eat dry food of all the fish.
Which is bizarre, because
it's totally bizarre.
I would have said, no way.
I mean, they would take pellets, they would take flakes, not flakes.
That's an importer's secret. Yeah, they're so hard to get to feed. That's
exactly.
why you're paying us all the money.
You know, they would take the frozen bloodworms, frozen brine shrimp. They would take the dried bloodworms, freeze-dried blackworms. I thought, man, this is too easy. So does any of that have to do with the ingredients of the food? Or is it the taste? Do fish have taste?
So that's the thing. I think the taste, okay, maybe not taste, because I can't guarantee
they smell.
I think the fish accepting a food is the most important part of a food.
Yeah.
Because regardless of the ingredients, like if you use the best ingredients in the world and I take a bite and I throw up, it doesn't do any good, right?
Yeah.
Like that. So I think the first catalyst is, do the fish eat it?
Right.
And then after that, it comes down to either ingredients or the way I get to use it.
Yeah.
Because like Repashy, I love that food. I know you don't have great luck with it. I love that food. I don't make it as much as I want to because it takes work.
That's my whole issue with it.
Yeah. Because you cook all day and you want to go home to cook food, right?
And how long does it take? It takes like 30 seconds to make it after the water's hot. But you know, that 30 seconds, I could have fed 5 tanks.
Right.
Right. So I still do make Repashy.
Mm-hmm. And we even fed it in Peru. When we were in Peru, we were using it for the plecos and stuff. Yeah.
I find it a little messier than some of the other foods.
Yep.
But it also seems fresher.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And should we tell them the secret that we talked about the other day?
Sure, I can't remember what the secret is, but yes.
Garlic press.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So and someone out there go try this tonight and
we haven't tried it
put
yet.
it in the comment box.
Yeah.
We want to take some Repashy and you squeeze it into the tank through a garlic press so it comes out worm-like.
Yeah. Because we were talking about the Vibrabites and the fact that the fish like the worm shape.
Yes.
And then we thought, what else can we turn into worms?
Right. I mean, there is something about worm, insect larva shape. They're all sort of long and wiggly.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know if it needs to be long and wiggly or if it's just like their mouth structure is built that way from thousands and thousands and thousands of years going, hey, we eat that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, you were in Peru this last summer. How many flakes did you see floating down the stream?
You know, not many.
How many pellets?
Although I think we did put some cookies in there to attract some fish. But yes, no pellets either.
No pellets. What about the little pleco discs? Any of those?
Nope.
None of those.
Rotten fruit and stuff, though.
Yeah. Fruit, nuts.
Leaves, lots of nuts.
Dead bugs and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what they're going to get in nature. And other fish.
Mm-hmm.
And eggs.
And dead fish.
And dead fish.
Yeah. Lots of dead stuff. Lots of animal poop.
Dead animals.
Yeah. Yep. We saw a lot of that kind of stuff. And so, you know, when you start talking about like that's the diet, I think our aquarium grade foods are actually pretty darn
They're
good.
way above that. Yeah.
You know, because if you think you're going, well, it's not natural though. It's like, yeah, but what if I naturally had to go eat and I had to like forage for myself and I'm eating some crappy berries and I'm eating something this and something that? Like, I'm pretty sure what I have available to me is pretty insanely good right now.
Right.
And I'm just choosing to not eat amazingly.
I mean, I've actually done a couple survival things where you have to eat off the land for and when you get hungry enough,
you'll eat almost
you'll
anything.
Eat anything.
Yeah, I would guess that's true.
And I'm pretty sure that fish are the same way. I don't know if they have the same hunger pangs that we do.
Right.
Because I think a lot of fish is its instinct.
Mm-hmm.
But still, you know, when there's food in front of them, they're going to bite at it.
Someone asked, this is a good question for you, because if you haven't, I think you know someone who has. Have you ever fed your fish birdseed?
No.
I've heard of people doing it.
I've heard of them using it to create infusoria.
Okay, makes sense.
And then they feed the infusoria.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, I've heard about everything: dog food, cat food, hot dogs, like
cracker crumbs.
Yep.
Breadcrumbs.
Almost anything. Yep. Cheerios, like watermelon. There's a bunch of things, but like so the analogy back when it goes to like a professional brand or a team versus ourselves, like we can make foods ourselves. I'm just not a nutritionist, and no matter how much I research, I don't think I can make a product that will be as palatable, as clean fed, that type of thing. Like, and when I say we, I'm talking as a hobbyist, like as a business that contacts another business going, what can we formulate that will do well based on the formulas you already make? Right. Like I've got a huge leg up. Yeah. That's like asking, like, I want to start a new football team and I want to draft the players out of the, you know, not just like, I'm going to start with my own high school team and move my way up, you know? So, because I was trying to think, I was like, how do I explain why like my fry food is so good? Because honestly, the ingredients aren't insanely better than anything else. You know, like they're just like the first ingredient. I want to make sure I quote it correctly, but as salmon, fish meal, and then there's yeast, marine proteins, which is usually like kelp and just
maybe some krill dust.
Could be mussels and just all kinds of crap like that. Spirulina, kelp, and then vegetable products. Like none of that stuff sounds like, oh man, that sounds like it's a way better food than anything else. But I do know what's so good about it is that from the time the food that's in this bottle lands at our warehouse, within 2 weeks, it's in your fish room. Right. That's the biggest difference between like let's say these, like I can't know when they packaged them. They expire 05/2021. Like this is the thing I think about is why do we put the expiration date when we could put the produced date? Like if you knew this was made yesterday, you're going to go, oh, this is super fresh. If I say this expires in 2 years, you have no idea when this was made. Right. You know, and I know from a guy that buys a lot of fish food, when you go visit the warehouses, you're going, oh, they have 10,000 of these sitting there. Exactly. And you go back 6 months later and they got 5,000 of the same shipment still sitting there. They basically know like, oh, well, it doesn't expire until 2021. We can afford to buy it in massive bulk and save a bunch of money. And I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever drank a soda or eaten chips like 1 month before the expiration date, it clearly tastes different.
Definitely tastes it. And, you know, my guess is the reason there's an expiration date on that is when they manufacture, they say, okay, we're going to manufacture enough of that particular food for 3 years. Then we'll take the next food and we'll manufacture enough of that for 3 years. So they're not resetting up every year. They're setting up every 3 years.
Because I do know when I have foods made, it's the production run. Like the cost is once you run something through, we have to shut everything down and clean all of the equipment before you can run the next food through. Right. Because you can't cross-contaminate. Right. And so it makes a lot of sense to be like, yeah, let's just make an insane amount. Yes. Especially if you're like a Sarah or a Hikari or a Northfin or whoever is like, we got 47 different foods. Right. And not only when we have it run, you have to get on a production schedule. It's not like you just call up and tomorrow they run it. They're like, okay, we have a spot open in 7 weeks. Right. That day will be dedicated to making that food.
But let me see the fry food. So there is another thing about this food.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just say I had this thing of fry food, and give me that. And let's call this fry food.
Yeah.
Presentation might be better here. It's kind of a cool container.
Yeah.
But ease of use.
Right.
That also is something you got to look at in your food, you know, when you're buying it. I mean,
I do agree. I was going to bring up that point because I break it down into live foods being the biggest problem. Like, you got to keep them live in a fridge. You got to do stuff.
Right.
Then you have frozen. Like, you actually have to keep it in the freezer. Some families don't allow that / like, when I didn't have a freezer. Yeah. When I didn't have a freezer out here, there were definitely plenty of days where I was too lazy to walk through the rain, go get some frozen,
I agree.
feed it. And then I either did one or two things. Either fed extra because I'm like, oh, there's only 4 or 5 cubes left. Or I didn't go get it at all because it was, so, or if I needed a little bit more, like, well, the last one's going to have some flakes or whatever I had sitting around. And then it goes to like freeze dried and dry. And these are typically foods I leave at the tanks or put in auto feeders.
Right.
And so I do believe what I've said over the past few years, and that is like frozen food like 5 times a week and dry food like twice a week. Now, if you can do live, that's even better. But at the same time, like for my grandma's tank, she always just had dry food because that's what
I grew up
she
with.
liked.
Yeah.
And that's what she just wanted to put some food in there, and it worked.
Yeah.
And so I do think the way you feed, and like the fry food catches on a lot with anyone that has a fish room or even stores. Even stores like, this is insane. And it was like, well, yeah, I developed a product for a guy that owns a fish store and a fish room, and I got to feed a lot of tanks, and it saves a bunch of time. So, those are the perks for like something like a fry food, because otherwise, why wouldn't I just say buy all the other foods?
Right.
That's the only. And I was thinking about why other brands don't do this, and it's because I pay almost $1 with shipping
for the bottle
to get this bottle to us.
Right.
Whereas like a bag, which I don't have a bag sitting around, but a bag, I did the math, and I have to buy these like 536 at a time. That's what fits in the box they ship.
Yep.
And it's something like I can buy that, or I can fit like 30,000 of these. And from China, these are less than a penny a piece.
Right.
And so that's, I think, the big thing when you're looking at, if you sell millions and millions and millions of units a year, and you're going, we're going to go broke buying these, and then shipping these around again is a problem. So, I think that's the only reason I've got a leg to stand on is using this is actually better.
It's easier to use.
Yeah, and I even use this before I developed this food. I would just put live baby brine, or I would do a bunch of frozen foods in here, and I would just take the frozen food and squeeze it through all the tanks.
Thaw it in the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I knew it worked, because I had already been using it, and then I just wanted the dry food version half-heartedly, because that's one I can ship. I can't ship you frozen foods, so there's always the bias of like, well, I got to figure out a way to make money on this idea, so don't let me fool you or anything like that. But that's why I love this food, and it's doing well. I do want to do a little lightning round type of thing. People are asking, what's the food you don't like? Try to think of the foods you don't like, and I already know a bunch of foods and that I don't like. And I want to start with, just because I don't like it doesn't mean it's not good. It could be, oh, I don't like cooking it, or I don't like the packaging, or I don't like the price, or I only keep rams and they won't eat it, Because I've been through almost every food on the market.
I have one. Have you had this one?
All right, what do you got?
Wardley burger.
No.
Okay. It's similar to Repashy.
Mm-hmm.
You would mix it, but I don't think you refrigerated it. Maybe you did. I can't remember.
Okay.
And you form it into like a little flat. The reason they call it Wardley burgers is because you're supposed to make little tiny round burgers out of it. It was horrible. I mean, back in the days, everybody bought, and it was made by Wardley's. I'm sure it was either an agar or a gelatin base.
Yep.
And it was like a powder, probably finer than your fry food, that you buy and mix it, and try to get your fish to eat it.
Like there's one I haven't tried that I've never brought in because I don't think it's gonna work. I think Dr. Tim's makes it, and it's it's meant on the same principle, but it's almost like you add the ingredients. I want to add garlic. I want to add this. I want to add this.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm literally like,
no.
Why don't you formulate the formulas for us, or why do I need you to provide garlic when I could go get garlic?
Right.
It's kind of that weird in between. I think it's catering to people that think I can make a food better than the professionals or something.
Yeah.
Which is a weird
and
market.
I think
they call them mix-ins or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But didn't Tetra come out with a gel type food?
They did for a long time.
It wasn't in the United States very much.
They had it in a foiled disc or something like that, and it was meant as the weekend feed. Oh, they had that one too.
Yeah.
That one was literally like a ketchup packet. Like,
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of. They didn't really catch on here, but then they had that like red foil thing that was like a bunch of compressed flake food or something.
With some that's similar to what Wardley Burger was.
And fish won't eat it. That's
they won't
the problem.
Touch it. They won't touch it.
So you put it in there for a weekend, and it's a rotting much food.
Of food.
It wrecked people's tanks every time, and they would buy it from, PetSmart or whatever, and you'd just be like, yeah, you killed all your fish, unfortunately.
So what's a food that
I don't like?
Yeah.
So I think I'm one of the few people on the planet that doesn't like omega-1 foods when everyone else rants and raves how good they are.
I don't like them either.
It's the reason I don't like it is because when I would feed out to a fish store of 300 tanks when I worked there, and at home with over 50 tanks, and then at my own store with 100 tanks, each of those tests, I never got a bunch of fish to eat it. There was always like half the fish aren't eating it.
Right.
Is the problem I ran into, even though it's whole salmon and it had like the ingredients look great.
The ingredients look great.
But it turns out Corey cooked it and it tastes like garbage.
And what can you attribute that to? It's how they process the ingredients.
Yeah, or maybe I always got super old batches, or maybe because there are a lot of people that swear by that. They're like, my fish love it, and it's the best.
Right, I agree.
So that's another one. So there's other things too, like for instance, Hikari bloodworms. I really like their bloodworms. One, because I know they get the good bloodworms. Like they buy out all the best bloodworms. Right. So there's in the bloodworm trade, there's like grade A, grade B, grade C.
Right.
They get all grade A. And then like San Francisco Bay gets the grade B. So when you feed it, you'll notice the cube is like already red when you thought there's like a lot of, for lack of a better term, blood or brown in the water. And Hikari doesn't have that problem, so that's where it's like, okay, Hikari bloodworms I love. And then if you talk about brine shrimp, I know San Francisco Bay has the good brine shrimp, and they've got the second best brine shrimp. So each company even does things, first and second and that type of thing. That being said, I still carry and use their brine shrimp because it's good, and it's easy for people to go, oh yeah, I use this, I use that.
Right.
It's not that big of a difference. But then there's like Ocean Nutrition that makes like aquariums and stuff like that, like Aquarium. It's like a little gel mixed crap.
Gumdrop?
Yeah.
Okay, the gumdrop bloodworms, I absolutely hate those.
Because the fish won't even eat them pretty much.
It has to be how they process.
Because they're exploded or whatever?
Yeah, they're already exploded. They're not like a real... So they must have used heat, I'm guessing.
I don't know. Because I don't know enough. Because I do know when you freeze some things,
it'll explode.
They'll explode.
Right.
So maybe they don't have the flash freezing capability. I have no idea. It's in a realm I don't know about.
Right.
But so someone said the gumdrop bloodworms gave my angelfish bloat.
I think they're full of air, and I don't know.
That I don't know. But what I do want to point out is, even though I consider frozen to be good, there are downfalls with all the food. Like X amount of times a year, you're going to forget the bloodworms, and they're going to thaw and spoil. So there is downfalls to even some of the better stuff. Like you don't have to worry. Like a freeze-dried bloodworm, never going to be a problem.
Right.
Frozen, a problem. Live, a problem. So even the things that are better also have downfalls. And you can see people in here that, people are battling whether their fish love omega-1 or hate it. And same thing. I think it comes back to that VibraBite. If you don't have German blue rams, you think it's the best food ever.
Right.
Well, maybe not the best food ever, but you're going, it's really good. If you had tons of fish like that won't eat it, then not so good.
I also think, I mean, you know, and this just comes from me raising so many fry up. You can condition fry when they're really little to eat whatever you want to feed them.
That's true. Pretty much anything.
So, you know, it might, not saying I'm going to do this experiment, but maybe I raise the next group of ram fry on the Vibrobites.
Yeah, to prove a point, just to be like, oh, yeah.
Maybe they say, oh, all of a sudden I like this, but maybe they don't. And it, you know, I mean, who is it? Lucas.
L.R. Brett's, yeah.
He only feeds the one food.
The tetracolor granules. Yeah.
And there's some fish in my fish room won't touch that and others that eat it up.
That's always been my experience. And that's why I've never been like 100% backing on it. Because I'm like, how do I tell people to use this? And then half my fish won't eat it and they'll have the same experience. But he does a ton of livebearers, and in general, livebearers will eat it.
Yeah.
And then also a ton of shrimp, and they'll eat it. So it's like for his fish room,
it works perfect.
Works amazing.
Right. And the rainbows will take it. Yeah. So
let's answer some super chats. I know we got one from Jeff Rose, $20. Hello, Corey and Dean. If you had to have, I'm guessing one type of food to feed the most of your tanks, would it be flakes, pellets, and why? All right. So if you had to choose one type, as in frozen, live, flake, pellet, wafer, like a style of food, not necessarily like a food.
Well, one thing I found, and we will promise you we'll do a video on this someday, of how I set my fish room up when I'm away.
Yes, you talked about that. I'm trying to get him to make that video for his channel.
Yeah,
I'm trying really hard
to
to get him to make videos.
So when I'm away and someone else is taking care of my fish, I only feed frozen food. And the reason I only feed frozen food is it's easy to control the amount with the cubes, right? And fish tend to eat all the frozen food up right away. And I only have my tanks fed once every day or once every other day.
Right, which when you're home, you typically feed what, at least twice?
At least twice a day. Yeah. Fry sometimes 3-4 times.
Yeah, so my food that I pick, if I could only ever have one food, it's a little bit hard because I have some extremes of some very, very big fish.
Right.
And I have some small fish. But assuming if we could discount the one tank of like Mabu puffers and other giant
the
fish
ones that have to
have something else,
right,
I would choose flake food every time. If I could only ever pick one.
That would probably be my second one too, because they will eat that up.
And I can feed it to even when you breed bristlenose, when you breed guppies, when you breed anything.
Even my L number plecos, they'll take that. So
and that's the thing is I still, in a perfect world, at some point, really want to develop a very high-end flake food. Something like there's a guy has a company called Almost Natural, and he uses a lot of high-end ingredients, and it's like $30 a pound. And I fed it to my fish, and they love it. But
it's $30
a pound. Right. So I do want to point out that we've got some new members of the channel. So we got Zero Remorse, we have Creedmoor Aquatics, and Dean's Fish Room even got the green name.
I figured that. I had to have the green name.
If you see the green name in the chat, that's where they're getting it. If you see the snail, that means they've been around for about a month or less. If they have the shrimp, they've been around for 2 months. And as you guys have been members for longer, you get cooler icons, and you can also get some custom emojis and the membership only live stream and that kind of stuff. So we got a super chat from LG3 Nation, kind of just a thank you. What's the best way to cultivate dwarf puffer food? I would say
cultivate.
Yeah, like just making more snails. I would say just having like ponds outside or a bunch of fish tanks with snails in it. Like so all the tanks in here, if I had one puffer tank, I'd probably never run out for pea puffers.
Oh, we're talking about pea puffers.
Yeah, specifically for dwarf puffer or pea puffers.
I wouldn't really know.
Yeah,
because I don't even think there's a snail in my fish room.
Which I love them,
but if I was, I would get one of those Rubbermaid tubs, fill it with shrimp and snails. And will pea puffers eat the shrimp too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You got free food. I mean, put red cherry shrimp and snails in there and put it under the dining room table and don't tell your mom.
All right. So here's a question. What were aquarium fish fed 100 to 200 years ago? I have an inkling. And whenever it goes back into super hundreds of years ago, I'm never a history buff, and so I use what I know to be fairly recent, like, 90 years ago they were doing this, but I can't be like, 173 years ago they're actually doing this, you idiot. And like, well, okay, sure, I guess.
I think a lot of it at that time would have been live foods from nature.
So I believe that to be true. Yeah. I also believe...
Table scraps.
Yes. Yeah. That's the other one that I'm fairly certain about, because it was done for lots of koi and like giant gouramis and just other big fish. They would feed it, and some of those fish would also be food fish. Like, we got to eat that.
Right.
So, yeah, I could... That's my best legitimate guess / like educated guess, without just going, it turns out Wikipedia says... Yeah. And that's that's populated by people like us making a guess most times.
A lot of my first fish were guppies, and I would take soda crackers and crumble them.
Yeah.
Or I would take not dry bread, but just a slice of bread and take the crust off, and then crumble a little bit of that. It was pretty much back then. It was Wonder Bread.
And did guppies like live for a decent amount of time on that?
They grew. They bred.
Then I mean, in reality, there's protein in there. Like, there's stuff.
How many fish foods have wheat meal in it?
Right, which that brings up a good point. So the wheat meal, I wanted to stress there's another way to cheat. Well, I'm saying cheat, to make the stats be what you want them to be by breaking up. So if you have wheat in there, or soybean, you can have soybean meal. You could also have whole soybean. You could have soybean middlings, you could have soybean meal, and if you break those 4 up, they're 4 different ingredients. So you could have a food that's 99% soybean, and yet the largest ingredient is bloodworms, because you're like, watch this, I'm going to put bloodworms, and then I'm going to break this up into 6 categories that you if you saw it in person, you'd be like, you're just calling that 6 different things.
It's basically, exactly.
So, and that's where you kind of got to trust the company and the way the fish react and all that kind of stuff, because if you want to be unscrupulous, you can literally just do anything you want, and to make it come out percentage-wise and ingredient-wise. And I think that's why there was so much backlash on what's the ingredients. Right. But I think we need to focus on, do we like to feed it? Do the fish like to eat it? And then the other thing is the price.
Right.
I think that's a big, so people were asking me, what do I think of Northfin Fish Food and New Life Spectrum? My official stance is, I think they make perfectly fine foods. Like, if either one of them says, here's 42 tons of it, I'm going to feed it because it's free, right?
Yeah.
But I remember when you had first brought Northfin Fish Food, like back from Canada or something, you had a thing, and I was like, oh yeah, I've been hearing about that. And the krill was something like $30 a pound.
Right.
And for me, I can get live blackworms or something like that cheaper than that. And then if 1 pound of krill pellets is $30, and I can get 3 pounds of frozen krill, to me it's like, well, I'm pretty sure the frozen krill is better than the pellet krill.
Probably, yeah.
And so there is the ease of use of like, okay, well, I just got to take it out of a package and feed it. But is that justify 3 times the cost?
There is one other difference between that, though.
Okay.
The pelleted krill is something pretty much any size fish can devour.
True.
The frozen krill, it's got to be a fish big enough that can chew that up. In
my mind, I was always thinking, like, I'd rather buy frozen bloodworms and brine shrimp. Like, if I had $30 to spend on food, I would split it up into probably like brine shrimp, bloodworms, cyclops, and maybe some mysis shrimp or something, than just have the pellet krill.
The frozen cyclops is a great step up from baby brine shrimp, from live baby brine.
Yeah.
It works really well because the size range works really good.
And so someone wants to know my opinion on New Life Spectrum. I think I really like their Thera A formula, which is the one that has tons of extra garlic.
Yep.
I think it's really good at getting finicky fish to start eating. And I've never been able to prove that, like, feeding a fish that had an internal parasite, a bunch of that got rid of it. But I have noticed fish that were not eating very well would eat that food.
Yeah.
But I don't think it gets rid of internal parasites. Or at least I haven't seen it do that. So I don't know if I believe that claim of like, oh, look, it's doing that, because I haven't seen it do it.
The thing is, it has to have so much medicine in it for them to get it, because that medicine's first going to dissolve in the water as soon as it starts hitting the water.
Right.
So,
well, their theory is so much garlic that it could do it.
You know, garlic is kind of more of a appetite stimulator, right?
Right. That's what I think.
It's not really I mean, you know, they say it will cure all evil, but, you know.
I mean, I've read studies where, like, some people say it can cure ick and stuff like that, and maybe it can. I've also read a study that said if you had someone chopping up garlic and putting it into the pond where the fish are for 24 hours, they still couldn't put enough garlic in to get it in a high enough concentration before it would, like, lose its concentration.
Right.
So it's one of those weird things of, like, well, I've read both, and then, so if I read both and it contradicts each other, I have to fall back on what's my experience. And my experience is I've never cured a parasite with garlic so far.
And maybe it's one of those things like, you know, I mean, the parasites might be curing themselves, first of all. I mean, a tank with ick will cure itself if you do the proper maintenance, water changes and all of that.
Technically, if you gravel vac enough, yeah.
Gravel vac, right. So, I mean, have you ever sliced a piece of garlic and thrown it in the fish tank and had a fish eat it? Me neither.
I've never tried it, so yeah. A new member, we have Brian Eversole. Thanks for joining the team. I know we got some more super chats. Is flake food good for snails? I would say yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it's the best food. If you're saying what's the best food, probably something with some calcium and some other stuff. But the reality is flake food, definitely. If you ever have old food, I always feed that to snails too. Like, most fish aren't even picky, but I did want to chime on that. Like, keeping fish food fresh is fairly important.
Yeah, going through it, don't keep it.
Yeah, don't buy the giant jar because you save money. And if you are, make sure you pack it without oxygen. So, like, take out a portion. Like, you want to be doing those things. I always tell people, treat it like human food.
Right.
Like, if you wouldn't open up the bag of chips every day for 3 months and still be eating them, then don't do that with your flake food. Don't do that with your pellets.
Right.
Like that. Maybe you keep it in their fridge. Maybe you do these things that you would do as a human food. So.
Also, with snails, I think more importantly than the food is keeping some calcium in that water. Mm-hmm. Crushed coral or whatever.
Yep.
Because, I mean, especially in our neck of the woods, the shells will start disintegrating.
Yeah.
So keep some calcium in there.
Again, from the same person, what's your favorite food for koi? I'm trying to think what my favorite. Like, if cost is no object, I really like the Saki Hikari koi food, but I think a 40-pound bag is $250.
Whoa.
So there's that.
Yeah. And
then when I compare it to other foods that are like, let's say, 40 pounds for $80, also still pretty good. So that's... I'm about in that price point when I'm buying koi food and I'm trying to color them up for a show. But I would, if I was recommending to most people, pick any team you like. Hikari, Sarah, like any team you already. If you're on Team New Life Spectrum, great, buy their koi food. Like you're gonna like it. Yeah. It's not gonna make that much of a difference. If you're at very high levels of competition, that's when think of it like we might go out to eat. And we go to restaurants, stuff like that. If you're going to compete in some kind of competition, you have a dietitian going, no, you're going to protein load this week, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do that, then we're going to do that, then it's fight week or whatever competition week. And so in that high level of koi, same thing. We're going to you protein load them, put bulk on them, then you starve them for 2 to 3 weeks to get them to not look bloated. And then you want to feed things like marigold and stuff like that to really bring the color out. And there's a lot of stuff, but I think just pick a team you're already on board with. And that's where I can say I'm on board with most Hikari stuff, Aquarium Co-op stuff, obviously, Sarah stuff. I'm trying to think of the stuff where I've used them for like 10 plus years and I could pull almost any product off a shelf and go, it should be of this quality.
Well, and there's some like for me, there's some companies where I only will use one of their foods. Like a good example is I use the Extreme Nano Pellets.
Right.
Okay. Why? Because my fish eat them. They're all gone. They don't
They were all the rage for a while.
Yeah.
With New Life Spectrum, like it was a big rivalry.
But the nano one, and I swapped them out for the New Life Spectrum.
Okay, yeah, interchangeably or?
Price point.
Okay.
I think they're pretty much the same exact pellet.
When you look at the ingredients, they look very similar.
Right.
But what if it, again, give us the same ingredients, they could come out way different. So it's one of those weird, from the outside looking in, they look very similar. They seem to feed out the similar. They seem to be taken by fish similarly, So it might be like you being a teacher making a cheeseburger, and then one of your other teachers right next to you making a cheeseburger. Like, oh, the quality is fairly in the same, same realm.
Right.
Right. All right, let's keep chugging away at these.
Okay.
Have you ever mixed meds into Repashy, like Prozzy or General Cure, and thoughts on medicated New Life Spectrum foods? So I've never mixed it into Repashy myself.
And actually, some of those you might not want to mix in because they're not designed to be mixed in with food.
That's where I was going to go, is like, I don't know that all those can necessarily take boiling water to mix it.
Well, also, do you want your fish to inject that or ingest?
That's always medicine. That's why I don't use a lot of medicated foods, is I'm afraid, like when I'm feeding a tank, how do I know that this guy didn't eat 7 cheeseburgers and you only ate half a cheeseburger? Right. And we know that it's 2 cheeseburgers to kill the whatever.
Right.
So that's where I'm always leery about that.
I mean, there are a lot of foods that are sold as medicated foods where they there's like flakes where they've added metronidazole. The biggest
problem I've always had with them is the fish don't want to eat them. They don't it's bitter. Oh, it's gross.
I don't like the taste of medicine.
Yeah,
do you?
Exactly.
I mean, go chew on an aspirin and tell me if you like it.
Yeah. So that's the big problem I've always had. But the New Life Spectrum foods, we sold them. I tested them a bit. I don't know that I could ever say one got rid of ick.
Yeah.
But I do think their metronidazole one was halfway decent. The problem I found was they had problems keeping them in stock, and they were very expensive. Like I think I had to sell a container of food this big for about $32. Right. And I'm not convinced that food was better than just using the medicine and a different food.
Yeah.
Or a frozen food.
I mean, from my experience, the only medicine that I've ever felt like I've been successful at getting into fish in food is metronidazole. Mm-hmm. And I think all of the rest end up in the water column. Some of them are not made to be ingested. So yeah, I would...
Yeah, so I guess I would say I'm not super well versed in it, and I haven't invested much time because I treat fish in the water column and it works well for me.
Works well.
If I was like, oh God, I can't cure stuff, I would be spending all my time going, oh man, I got to put it in the food. I got to figure it out. I got to figure it out. I got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Now they used to have, what was it? It was like a gel food that contained erythromycin, but they don't make it anymore.
They don't make it anymore. No.
But it used to be pretty awesome. Yeah. So, it's been done.
I can't remember who made that. Do you remember who made that?
I don't know. It came in a bottle.
Yeah.
And it had like a yellow top or something I can't remember.
I can't remember.
I want to say Aquarium, but that's another type of medicine. But I want to say the people that made that also made that.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
All right, we got Bob Kaler's Fish Hobby. I'm one of the lucky that got 6 of Lucas's super rare Goldie Eye Dakai rainbows. I have the Tetra Foodie feeds and my assortment of healthy foods. Dean, have you tried to breed this rare fish, and have either of us kept them? So Goldie Eye Dakai rainbow fish.
No, never kept them.
I haven't kept them either, but
if Lucas sent me some, I would keep them.
There you go.
Lucas, are you out there?
I think just watching what Lucas does and from what he's doing, I think feeding just good quality food.
Yeah.
Most rainbow fish aren't that hard to spawn if you feed them well.
Rainbow fish are probably they will start spawning for you.
They're probably already spawning.
Yeah, they might already be spawning.
Yeah.
If they're an inch and a quarter long, they're already spawning.
Yeah.
And it was Gary Lang that he came over to my fish room that time. He said, "Oh, these are already spawning." And so I'm thinking, but they're fry.
Yeah.
And so you drop a mop in the tank, and the next morning there's eggs in the mop. So rainbows spawn constantly. All you have to do is feed them and grow them.
Yeah.
So keep them alive, feed them good food, and you'll have fry.
Aubrey Wright is a new member. Thank you for joining. That $5 is going to go to buying Dean dinner tonight.
There we go.
Being on the show. I do want to address this one. What's my opinion of bug bites? My official opinion is I like about half of their line a lot, and then some of it not at all. So I really like the fine granule one for small fish because it feeds out really clean. And I like the pleco one, like the pleco stick, because it sinks.
The sticks that sink.
Yep. I'm pretty much not a big fan of all of the rest that are floating, like the pellets and that kind of stuff.
I don't like any of them that float.
Yeah.
I like the pleco one, the small one that sinks. There's also a medium one that sinks. But and I was going to
go either way.
I was going to bring this up at one point. The small ones work better than the big ones that sink. And why is that? Because it'd be like me or you. Okay, we're going to take a bite of steak. Yep. So here's 4 ounce bite. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to chew it, spit it out, take a bite, and then another fish is going to grab that. Or here's 4 half ounce bites, right? Or no, 8 half ounce bites, right? And you're going to be able to scarf those down. Mm-hmm. And fish will outcompete each other for food. Yes. So if you have a smaller pellet or granule or flakes break up, they can just chew those up. I tend to use smaller flakes or smaller pellets and smaller granules than the bigger, and I find better success rate.
Yeah. Especially in things like Oscars and stuff where their teeth are in their throat.
Right.
So often we see an Oscar this big and we're feeding them the largest pellet. The reality is like a medium or a mini size pellet, like a much smaller pellet, they would just swallow. And for some reason with animals, we go, big animal, big food.
Pellet, right.
But it's like, we're a big animal. Oh, give me the popcorn chicken. Give me the bite-sized stuff. Like for some reason we lose that in translation with our fish. And I think that's something to think about. And the one thing I don't like about half the foods out there is what I call the cast off. So you put a food in there and like particles.
Right, I agree.
You know, and so like New Life Spectrum, it doesn't happen so much when you put the food in.
It's after.
But when they poop it out, somehow it's always like dust, like like it's a crop dusting effect, which is weird. Bug bites, if depending on the fish they're eating, it can be pretty messy if they're whipping it around. It can get a lot of particles up in the water. Repashy can do that too.
But the bug bites, they will end up eating those particles.
Right, because usually it's a smaller fish. And maybe that's half the reason I don't like the African cichlid blend, because they don't go after the tiny particles, and you got cloudy water going on. Yeah.
Or they chew them up till they're small enough, and all that chewed up part goes out in the water.
So, but every line of food, or let me take that back. Every sports team has really good players, has mediocre players, and has bad players.
Right.
And you don't have to love the bad players. You just can fall in love with the Tom Bradys and whoever the all-stars are of whatever group you're into. And the best thing is like fantasy football or something like that, where you're like, oh, I'm going to take from this team, this team, this team, this team to make my super team for my fish room. Right. And that's what you do. And I think that's what I do. And constantly there's like, you've got your 7 or 8, like, oh, these are my starters. And you're always cycling through the rookies.
Ones you're testing.
Yeah, the rookies to go, oh, are any of these going to replace?
Exactly.
And so I think that's an important thing. And I was thinking about it quite a bit while I was driving in traffic today. I think most of us have food collectoritis. I think 9 out of 10 people are always searching for the best and have a mix of foods. And then there's 1 out of 10 that go, no, I'm only a Bulls fan. Right. I'm only a Raiders fan. Right. That type of thing. And so, but I think that person that says like, I only love the Mariners, they're such a diehard fan, they tend to drown out the people who are like, yeah, I like baseball.
Right.
Because they're just like, they're so passionate about the one that they, outcompete everyone else for, screen time, if you will.
So I can finish up bug bites really quick.
Okay, yeah.
Bug bites was the first food that all of the fish this year that came back from Peru got, and they all took it the first time.
Yeah. I think there's something said for the black soldier fly larva. More and more foods include it, and fish take to it really well.
Fish take to it, for some reason.
The other thing is, too, I think the new natural... Someone was asking me about this earlier, and I want to say... No, it's not this one, but Sarah is making a food with...
it has soldier fly larva.
Oh, it does.
Yeah,
okay,
it does. Yeah.
So the new...
I can't remember which one it is.
Yeah.
I think it's the tree.
I don't know which one it is, but they're incorporating it in, and I can't see it here on camera.
I can't either. It's too small.
the new line of the nature food that they're putting out, there's a couple of things to it. So like this one that happened to be is the treat mix, and it's got 12% krill, but the label itself is made to use up less paper and that kind of stuff. And then the cap, there's 30% less plastic in the cap. So they're trying to actually preserve nature, and then they're putting in no dyes. So it's brown on brown,
Oh, that's
and
nice.
they already know that doesn't sell as well. People know that the color sells.
Yeah. Have you tried that food yet?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, why?
How's it taste?
Oh, I haven't tried it, but yeah, it feeds out good.
It looks good.
And I like I guess in a perfect world, like, I haven't noticed a difference from a fish going, ooh, that's a red flake, now I'll eat it, versus the brown flake, and now I won't. And so I figure it's one less thing I'm putting in there, but whether that makes a difference, I don't know.
I don't think it's the color. I think fish will smell. Mm-hmm. And, they got to have some form of taste. I'm not sure if they do or not, but I'm guessing they do.
Well, there's got to be a reason why I'll eat this, but I won't eat that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that tastes like dead fish.
I don't know.
Because fish eat fish.
But I do like the nature line just because we're improving packaging and removing dyes. Like they took a product they already had, which I don't have it sitting here, but it was their GVD treat mix.
I remember that one.
And they're just like,
how do
we... Yeah, it's literally that one. So non-glossy label.
Right.
They changed the labeling a little bit, and I wonder if we can tell.
I could see the difference.
You could definitely tell the lids are different.
That one's thinner and lighter.
Yeah. So they're doing... they're doing things I like. It's like, oh yeah, we can not make. Is that? Oh yeah, what's that one? That one's got the brown lid.
Yeah, that one works really well. You eat that.
So Jimmy's been feeding his rainbow tank this, and this just goes to show we actually test this stuff out.
I didn't test that.
Like I brought home. They sent us some more samples because this hadn't been in the U.S. yet, but this
one smells
is
good.
The Flora Nature Flake, which is basically their spirulina flake, right? And it's got 7% spirulina, which is about right, because I remember reading studies that the maximum spirulina a fish could utilize would be about 13%. So, if you put like a spirulina 20 by ZoomEd, it's got more than they can utilize. So, I don't know. I'm testing it. We'll see how it goes. I haven't fed any of this yet, and I can send some home with Dean. Like I brought some samples. They sent us like 3 of each size and that kind of stuff, and we'll test it out, but...
I think this is the one that has the soldier fly larvae in it.
Oh yeah, right here. It says right on the front. It says 4% Hermitia.
But if you smell that, it smells really good.
Yeah, this is what I brought back from Interzoo. So there's literally not English on here anywhere. So they haven't. It's not meant to be in. Yeah, it definitely smells.
If I was a fish, I would eat that.
That's right. So yeah, we're even this. It's not. We don't sell it because they haven't made a United States packaging yet. Like there's no English on it, but we're already testing it, and Jimmy says fish love it. So that's kind of how we get to be first to market on a lot of these things. Like, sometimes like it just came out, you brought it in. It's like, well, yeah, but we've been testing it ahead of time, luckily. So
I will say, on the subject of Sarah, they have been around a long time.
It's something like 40 years or 50 years or something.
And they have not, they've been in the States and they've been out of the States. Mm-hmm. And I can remember some Sarah foods that I fed long time ago that I really liked. And I still like their foods today. Yeah. And it's, I think you're the only ones in my neck of the woods.
In your neck of the woods, yes. There are a few people in the States and they want us to help us like get it going in the U.S., but we've yet to like strike any kind of a deal or anything like that. Like the good news is I sell the product and I use it anyway.
Yes.
So, but I see, here's what I want to have happen in a perfect world. Instead of me and Dean just saying like, yeah, we like these products. I want to be able to say like, sponsored by Sarah. We do like this. And they paid us. Like now we can go to Peru again. Like that's like, we like the product either way. But if I can just say 3 words like sponsored by Sarah, and all of a sudden we get to go do something awesome, I will take that deal. That would
be awesome. Yeah.
There's other companies that have offered that, and we've turned down. There's one day I'll be able to tell the story. I just don't want to get sued over that story, so I can't tell that story. But we've hit the hour mark. I think this was a fun 1-hour thing. I got to fly to China this weekend, so there's that.
Sunday, right?
Yeah, I leave Sunday. So I got to get a bunch of stuff ready. So there won't be a live stream next week. But, in the comments down below, let me know if you want to see Dean back on. Let me know. I forgot to make a poll. Usually I put a poll like so that's how we knew we were going to speak about fish foods is people voted. I didn't put a vote. Yeah, let's get a like. Let's get shares.
We could do like a 10-second poll of what's your favorite brand of food.
All right, and then we could. Okay, here. So put your favorite team.
Only your brand.
Are you Team Sarah? Are you Team Hikari? Are you Northfin? Are you New Life Spectrum? Are you Aquarium Co-op? Like whatever food team you are, put that in there, and then someone will count that up afterwards. Like I won't have time, but someone will count that and be like, okay, we had 37 for Hikari, we had 22 for Omega 1, we had, so yeah, do that. That'll be the unofficial poll, and then we'll try to figure out a show for next time. The problem is we can have you on today, but you go back to work next week, I think, right?
Yeah, but we could do maybe like a Sunday night.
Oh, we start late enough now, though, technically. At 6, you're off
That's
work.
True. Yeah, that is true.
Yes, that's another reason why I moved it to
I forgot
Tuesday.
you're starting.
Yeah, we start late
later,
now.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I decided, I tried to do it for everyone else's schedule, and I decided I need to do it for my schedule where I can attend the most. Because I was like, I'm always out of town on a Sunday. So got a lot of Tetra.
A lot of Tetras, a lot of Hikari.
Cobalt, yep, don't want to forget that one. Tetra's doing well. Tetra, I think Tetra's really good at marketing. They've had a lot of the market for a lot of years.
But I would say Tetra is probably one of the companies that has changed the most over the years.
True.
They've brought forward different technologies.
Well, one of the weirdest things I don't agree with is that I'm not allowed to sell any Tetra product online. They've made it so it can only be sold in stores now, and I think that's the most backward decision you could make in this time.
That's not good because, I can tell you off camera where that's driven from.
All right, we'll get the dirty secrets.
Yeah,
and then let us know down in the comments what videos you want to see Dean make. I'm really trying to pressure him. I know he's got a bunch of work and that kind of stuff, but I'm trying to get him to even do just like a video a month, like one video a month. Try to get something up there. But what do I got coming out Thursday? It might be more 10-gallon tank ideas. And then I know we've got Quality Aquatics Tour and Dietzenbach Tour. Some good stuff. But hopefully I'm going to film a bunch of China. Let me know if you want to see something specific in China down below as well. And it's Tuesday, so we got to go get tacos.
There you go.
That's my move. We'll see you guys later.
Cheers.
Thanks for all the new members.